This module tackles one of the most sensitive areas in Treasury, and that's investment policy compliance. Policies are usually long. They're often written in legal or semi-legal language, and in practice, many teams rely on experience and memory to interpret them. That creates risk. Now, not because people are careless, but because interpretation is inconsistent. So in this module, you'll build an automation that turns policy language into structured, repeatable checks. The goal is not to replace judgment. The goal is to make policy application consistent, transparent, and easier to review. This is the kind of automation that audit, risk, and leadership actually appreciate. So now for our last workflow, we're going to build something very different from the first two. Now, in the first two, we had a similar flow, right? We would go to Google, we'd get some data from Google, we would transform that data to get it ready for an agent, we'd feed it into an agent, and then we'd send an email alert. But now we're going to do something very differently. First of all, this is going to be an interactive agent. This is going to be an agent. But now we're going to do something very different. This is going to be a workflow where users can come to ask the basic everyday questions that can kind of drown down the Treasury function. This is also going to be a resource for all of the Treasury teams to make sure that they're staying on policy and compliant. What's going to be different about this is we're going to introduce a new concept called embeddings and retrieval augmented generation. Now, those are big, scary words. You may have heard them, you may not have. But what embeddings and retrieval augmented generation together means is that you're giving AI tools data that they can reference. That's really what it means. It's like if you go to ChatGPT and you attach a PDF and it can read the PDF, it's embedding the PDF into the AI model's capabilities, and the retrieval augmented generation, it's generating augmented by retrieving data from the embedding. That's really what they mean. We're embedding that PDF like when you attach it to ChatGPT, and we're augmenting our generation by retrieving from that information. But we're going to create that so that you can have a dynamic conversation with an AI tool that knows your policies. Now, just think about this. You could expand this to run entire workflows. You could attach these embeddings and do this retrieval on our last two workflows. You could add additional information about liquidity. You could add additional information about your cash movements. You could add so much additional context. And that's why I wanted to do this as an entirely separate tool for you, so you can really focus on learning these tools, because it's a great skill set to have to help augment your Treasury function. Now, we'll start where we've started before, which is with our process map. And again, it's still going to be step 1, start and triggers. Step 2, data and inputs. Step 3, decisions and rules. And step 4, define outputs. So we're just going to copy our cash movement alert one, and we're going to turn this into our policy compliance assistant. All right, so there's our policy compliance assistant. And we'll put it up here as well. Okay, so start and triggers. So this one, again, this is going to be chat-based. So there's going to be two things that will trigger this, because there's two parts to this. One part is making sure the policies are updated. The other part is answering questions. So part 1 is going to be triggered when a new policy document is available. And part 2 is going to be when a user has a question. So part 1 is going to be an independent trigger that's going to build this database of information in a way that AI can read it. Part 2 is going to be when a user has a question and comes to it just like you would go to ChatGPT. Now, your data and inputs. Well, this is really going to be your policy manuals. That's it. You could add other things if you wanted, but the data is just going to be your policy manuals. Decisions and rules. So again, you're going to be asking questions based on the policy manual. So what you want to say here is provide citations from the policy when you answer questions. Never make up anything not stated in the policy. So a couple of guardrails just to say, hey, don't go inventing stuff. This is not the place for that. And if you're not able to do that, send them to a human. And then the output is just going to be a response to the chat. To chat in plain text. So just like if you're working with ChatGPT, you type it in plain text, it's going to come back in plain text. That's what we're looking for. This is a way to answer questions, but we also want to the response to chat in plain text. So we want to have the response to chat in plain text. We also want to have citations because that's one of our rules we want to follow. Just like before, let's snip this and feed it into ChatGPT. Okay, so we've got our snipping tool ready. Let's go ahead and snip this. There's our process map. Let's go ahead and attach the process map. Using the attached process map, please review the process for anything critical I may have left out. This is our check to make sure that our process map is robust, and then from there we're going to have it help us build out our blueprint. Okay, that's a solid first pass. Let's see, so document ingestion and version control. So we could say policy manuals, but we want to see how new policies are ingested, old policies are retired. You can certainly set all that up. What we're going to do right now is we're going to have a folder on Google that's going to hold our policy manual. And if we change it, we just change the file. You don't have to overcomplicate everything. You certainly can. You can add as much complexity, as many bells and whistles as you want if they truly save you time and make the process better. But something like an investment policy manual is going to change so rarely, maybe every year, if not even less frequently than that. It's easier to just put it somewhere and change it out. Let's see, we've got chunking and indexing logic. So this is a little bit older information right here because what we know now is that N8N can handle this. So this is somewhere where you sometimes can say if something doesn't feel quite right or doesn't look like the functionality, say, please check the most current information on the internet to make sure this makes sense because it will chunk automatically. Let's see, confidence and coverage. Yeah, so we can put some checks in like that. And then we could automate the escalation and the human in the loop. So we could automatically, if it can't answer a question, we could send it to the expert. And that'd be a really cool thing to do. We don't need to complicate it now, but that is something we could do. All right, so we've got this all built out. So now that we have our process map laid out, it's time to set up the requirements for our workflow. And we can keep working in this exact same chat, just like we've done before, because we already have our process map. So let's go ahead and bring in our prompt. Act as a skilled financial analyst using the process map I provided via attachment to create a requirements document for an AI agent workflow using N8N. The document should spell out the purpose, the inputs, the rules, the outputs, the knowledge, the tools. Ask me any questions you need to give the best possible output. We'll send that away and we'll let chat do its magic. It can absolutely turn this into requirements. I love it. All right, it's going to produce a formal requirements document based on the process map and the workflow. So here is our AI policy compliance assistant. The purpose is to provide employees with accurate, auditable, and policy-based answers to questions by retrieving and citing authoritative internal policy documents. The workflow is designed to reduce manual interpretation, improve consistency, and ensure that guidance is grounded strictly in approved policy language. I love it. Here's our inputs. So let's see, we've got natural language policy questions, we have policy documents, we have system inputs using vectors. Here's our authoritative source rules, version control rules, citation rules, confidence and coverage rules, escalation rules, access control rules if implemented. Don't usually need that on policies, but good to know it's there. Outputs, system outputs, audit and logging. Here's the knowledge we're going to give the tool. Here's the tools. We'll be working with N8N and OpenAI or equivalent, but we will be working with OpenAI. Key assumptions and some targeted follow-up questions. Okay, so which policy domains are in scope? This will be Treasury policies. Policies will be stored Google Drive in PDF. This is for regulated production use. We don't require SOX because that would be when you use the results of it. Don't require SOX. Let's see, preferred escalation channel would be human in the loop. And we don't need access control. Okay, so now it's going to go back. It's going to take our answers. It's going to do revisions and give us our final workflow requirements document. Updated purpose. Here's our inputs. Here's our rules. So you'll see it's added human in the loop escalation and it's removed role-based access control because we've said we don't need it. So I'll have our outputs coming in, all of our knowledge, our tools, and a summary. So there is our agent requirements. So there is our workflow requirements ready to go. Now we can take this and turn it into our blueprint so we know what we're actually going to build when we get into N8N. Let's go ahead and pull this over. Act as a skilled financial analyst. Using the agent requirements you helped me create above, create a blueprint for my AI agent workflow. I will be building the agent in N8N. The blueprint needs to include role, responsibilities, inputs, workflow, outputs, guardrails. Ask me any questions you need to give the best possible output. We'll send that away, and we'll let it do its magic. All right, so this is the operating model for the Treasury Policy Agent. Here it comes. We have our role again, a controlled policy-bound virtual Treasury analyst. Here's all of its responsibilities, our user inputs, our policy inputs, our system inputs. So it's just taking the requirements and making it more specific for the actual build-out. Now here's an N8N-oriented workflow. We've got our trigger with the policy update. So this is, again, workflow A, where we have our N8N workflow, and there's going to be two workflows that I'll walk you through. The first workflow is going to be where we ingest the policies, and the second workflow is actually going to be the assistant, because the policies don't update all the time. We don't need to run that workflow. So here's the Treasury Policy Q&A that's going to run a lot. And there's a path where there's no answer. There's a path where there's an okay or a partial match. There's a path where it sends to a human. Here's our outputs, both the answer and the audit. Some guardrails that we're going to build in, and some targeted clarifying questions. So let's see. Designated human reviewer. We'll say this is a Treasury manager. Escalation to be blocking or non-blocking. Let's say non-blocking. These are professionals. Audit logs for 90 days. Doing a simple policy owner field for routing. No, thank you. All right, and then it will take those feedback and it's going to go adjust our agent blueprint for us. So you'll see here it's acknowledged our changes from our questions. Here's our updated role, responsibilities, our inputs, and our workflow tweaked. And then this is the workflow we can use to build out N8N. We may not be quite this fancy because I really want you to focus on the bones of this, but this is all here for us as we need it. And guardrails, and we're ready. So no more questions. So now with the blueprint built out, it's time to build the brains of the workflow, which is going to be the AI agent and its system prompt. So let me grab the prompt and pull it over. Act as a skilled financial analyst. Using the agent blueprint you helped me create the master system prompt for my AI agent workflow. I will be building the agent in N8N. The system prompt needs to include the role, the tone, the rules, the behavior. Make sure the prompt is reliable, including step-by-step reasoning, explicit rules, output templates, fallback behavior. Ask me any questions you need to give the best possible output. We'll send that away, and ChatGPT will get to work. All right, and it's coming back. I like this. It's built to be annoyingly reliable in production. That's great. That's exactly what we're looking for. You are the Treasury Policy AI agent. You act as a controlled, policy-bound virtual Treasury analyst. It's giving the tone. We don't want jokes or slang or hype here. Some non-negotiable rules you must follow. No implied authority. That's good. We don't want to be giving approvals. Security, behavior. Here's the process you should follow. And here's the output format. So provide exactly this output format. And this status right here, this is going to allow us to move forward with our if node. So that's really helpful as well. Status, citation, answer style. what to do if there's no answer, and what to do if it needs review. There's the citation rules, the answer style, and the fallback response. So what to do if there's no answer and what to do if it needs review. So that's fantastic. Let's go ahead and start building. Now, just to show you what we've got, again, our F9 Finance Coffee Shop. This is our investment and debt policy. Should look very familiar to a Treasury audience. We've got our guiding principles. We have our scope, the roles and responsibilities of each person in the process, authorized institutions, our cash and investment policy, a couple of sections there, our debt policy, our internal controls, reporting and monitoring, exceptions, policy review, and acknowledgement. So pretty standard document. This is in a PDF format sitting on Google Drive, and that's what we'll be working with here. So then we'll go over to N8N. And again, we're going to have two phases of this workflow that will run separately. So this first step is going to trigger manually because we only need to run this if and when our policy manual changes. So for this, we're going to trigger manually. So we have to come in here and execute this. That's not something we want a user doing. We want the user to be able to interact just with the chatbot, which is kind of phase 2 of this. We want the ability to get this information in whenever we know the policy is updated. All right, so that's execute. So now we have to go get it. Now, before we set this up where we were going to do a search to see what files are available, in this case, because it's a fixed file we want to reference, we're going to be able to point Google Drive directly to it. So let's go to Google Drive, and I'm going to download a file. And in this case, we can do it by the ID, and I can just copy and paste the ID in because I don't need to go search for it. This doesn't need... I can just copy and paste the ID in. I don't need to go search for it because it's going to be this file until we update the manual. All right, so there we're going to download this. Let's go ahead and execute the step. We also don't need to convert it because... All right, let's go ahead and execute that. We should get our download. There is our download, our investment policy PDF. Now notice before we had to convert the file so that if it was Google Sheets, it would become a CSV. This is a PDF. PDFs are handled by pretty much everything, hence why it's called a portable document format, if you didn't know what PDF meant. So it's very portable. This can move over and we don't need to do anything crazy with it. We also don't need to prep the data because what we're going to work with for the embeddings is already designed to handle this. So what we're going to work with for the embeddings is something called a vector store. Now, vectors are essentially just clusters of data that AI can recognize. It's just a pattern recognition machine. You can go really in depth into this. I've actually got some other courses on here about building AI agents and AI tools that explain step by step what all these are. But what you need to know is vectors is just a way that AI can sort information. So let's say like those sections we had in our document, this is cash, this is roles and responsibilities. It's a way of sorting just like we would categorize the document, but in a way AI can understand versus a way humans can understand, and that's a vector store. Now, you can get really fancy if you want to have a lot of data. You can buy space to have a vector store, but for the purposes of this, we're just going to have the simple vector store that's built right inside N8N. Again, lots of options for vector stores, lots of cloud storage, but we're going to do the simple one to keep this easy. And this time, we're going to add documents to the vector store. All right, so we've got the vector store key, the embedding batch size is 200, and all of those other things we need to happen are going to happen in the background. Now, just like we've seen with our earlier AI nodes, we have to come down here and hit a couple of the plus signs. So first of all, for embedding, so that's going to take all of our information from our PDF and embed it in the vector store where it can then be retrieved. But that embedding is done in AI speak, so an AI model has to do it. So we have to click embedding and we have to add a model. For this, we'll use OpenAI, just like we've been using ChatGPT and OpenAI for everything else. So OpenAI is going to take our PDF, read it, and turn it into a vector store in a way that AI can read. All right, and the model is just going to be text embedding small. That's totally fine. This is not a big data set. All right, we'll go back up, and then we just need to add the document. And here we're going to use a data loader. This just pulls in data that was loaded earlier in the process. All right, so our data is in binary. Basically, if you haven't explicitly written JSON, just assume it's going to be in binary. The mode, we're going to load all the input. We don't need to filter. The data format, we're going to tell it it's PDF. You could have it be automatic, but we're just going to say, hey, we're going to feed you a PDF. And text splitting simple. We're just going to let everything here work as it needs to because its tools have gotten really good and they're good at running it. All right, so that is our vector store. Now I'm going to flip these over because we're going to have to use this embedding to connect our two different workflows. And that's it for your first step. That's everything you need to do. When we run this workflow, it's going to go get the data, it's going to embed it, and it's going to be ready to use. So we'll go ahead and execute it. It's downloading. It's going to the vector store. OpenAI embedded it using the default data loader, and you see the output is this vector. Now, remember when I said how it's in AI speak? This is the AI speak. It's turning it into numbers, right? AI can read it, we can't, but AI can process this dramatically faster. You see over here, this is the text. Over here, this is the vectors. These are the same thing. We just can't read this, but that's why it's so important to have this set up. So that's phase one. We've gotten the data and we put it in a usable format for our AI tools. Now we need to build phase two, which is where the user is going to interact. So for this, we need a second trigger. So our second trigger is going to be when there's a chat message received. All right, test the trigger. There we go. So when a chat message is received, it kicks off. Now that is going to feed right into an AI agent. So this AI agent is going to be what you actually have the conversation with. It's connected to the chat trigger node. Remember before we were feeding data in, but now we've got this retrieval augmented generation. It's going to pull from the vector store instead of pulling from data we sent it. All right. All right, now just like before, we're going to come over to our process map because we need a system prompt. So say, please write a system prompt for the AI agent in the chat Q&A workflow. So we're going to get our system prompt so we can set this up. Again, we don't need to do anything with the prompt or the source of the prompt. That's going to be the trigger. We just need the system message. And here comes back our system message. You are the policy compliance analyst. You're going to receive these inputs. You've got non-negotiable rules, high-risk topics that need to be escalated, HR, termination, legal, so things that we wouldn't want to be talking about in Treasury anyways. Please escalate them immediately. Here is the output format. We don't need to be too fancy with that if we just want to feed it back to the chat, but it's always good to have that structure there if we want to be fancy in the future. And we can go ahead and copy this over. All right, I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to add my system message, pop that in there. We need to grab a chat model, just like we did before. We'll use OpenAI. ChatGPT 5.2 will be great. There it is. And we'll give it, I don't actually want to give this anything except file search. So in this case, I don't actually want to give this any tools. I don't want it to web search or interpret code. I want it to use our policy document. Now, there is a way through here that you could do file search. I find it a little bit clunkier and I get less good outputs. It's totally doable, but the way I'm going to show you tends to be safer. It's also how ChatGPT will explain to you because I've learned it from asking ChatGPT. And I've just found that the built-in tool just doesn't work quite the way I would like it to. All right, so we've got our OpenAI chat model. We need to give this some memory because anytime we're having a conversation with the chat, we want it to be able to remember what we're saying. Let's say that it can go back 10 conversations. Otherwise, it's going to forget immediately anything you've already said to it. All right, so there's our context window. Our memory is set up. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to do a tool, and we're going to pull from the simple vector store. All right, now what we're going to do here is we're going to retrieve documents as a tool for AI agent. All right, we're going to go back to the same vector store, vector underscore key, and let's give it a limit of 20 so it can get a lot of good information. Now, remember when I said that this embeddings was going to be used for the other one? We're going to connect the embeddings over here because this means that the embeddings will be able to use the same settings. It's going to be able to use the same embedding information, and it's going to be able to explain the simple vector store to the AI tool. So you always want to make sure you use the same embedding node and just connect it to both. And that's the setup. If we've done everything correctly here, we're going to be able to ask a question about our policies, and it's going to come back with a straightforward answer. So first, let's go ahead and ask something that it should know the answer to. What are the approved places to invest free cash. So that information is in our policy, and it should be able to come back and give us that information. All right, so you'll see it's running, the chat ran, it's the AI agent, it pulled some embeddings. Now it's working back to the model, so it used all the information. Everything that's green was used. All right, and it's coming back and saying approved places to invest free excess cash include FDIC insured savings and money market, high yield savings, money market deposits, U.S. Treasury bills, government securities, short term CDs, and they should be placed only with these. And it's referencing the section. So if I go to that section and I want to check our policy, so if we come down to authorized financial institutions, federally insured, minimum investment grade, approved by the CFO. Beautiful, exactly what it says there. And then how about our places to invest cash? Exactly the list we have right here, these 5 items, and not here. That's fantastic. Now let's come back and say something I won't know. Tell me the maturities of all of our existing. Now it shouldn't respond to this. It should give me a, hey, I don't have this information, because I haven't given it any of that kind of information. Brilliant. I don't have enough information in the policy document, but it's being helpful saying finance prepares a quarterly debt summary and finance should track this. So if I have any questions, I should go ask finance because that's the policy. How cool is that? Now, just again, imagine how you could integrate this into workflows, right? You could build full-on workflows like a liquidity analysis and give it more context saying, if X happens, Y should happen. This needs to go to this level of approval. You could start routing approvals to the correct people. There's all kinds of bells and whistles you can add now that you know how to embed information from your policies, your procedures, or whatever other documents you have. How cool is that?